welcome to this exciting video where you once again join me in the wild landscape of Scotland here, and today we've come to document what is potentially a piece of ancient abandoned Scottish history, and it lies here in the Glen of Glen Prosen here in Scotland, which is one of the Angus glens. When I was out like last month with the channel DJ, we found ancient abandoned buildings at Glen Clova, and I believe this is a similar thing, but today we're here in Prosen, and just check it out. There's like stones there and different construction. There is a slight breeze blowing down the valley today, folks, so I do apologise for that in the audio, but it's like a crazy adventure off, and when I noticed some history that I've never seen before. And last week when I went to the abandoned croft further down the glen, this is when I noticed this, and it's crazy how one adventure can often lead like to another, and I just keep finding more and more like abandoned history in the landscape. Wow, you can see with this here, folks, look, it's an ancient stone building. Like, you see the outline of it with the square. It's crazy to think that it's just abandoned here in the wilderness, just forgotten and lost to time. Nature just takes back over, and places like this, they're a small relic of their former existence. It is cool to come and document it before it's lost forever. A little bit of Scottish history, maybe an ancient like farm croft or even a settlement here on the hill. It looks older than like the farm croft that I visited last week, so it shows that it's like, I would say, an ancient structure. Maybe 1600s and older, I would say for sure. Buildings like this could date back way back in time. It's just like a madness to think about that stuff, like. And we'll go and take a look right along. So there's a few of these buildings. Look at the wild environment. The nettles are still growing strong here. I'm trying to imagine what might have been here at one time. Every now and again the wind just gusts along here, and I believe there is rainstorms up in some of these glens. The sky's so grey and dark, but that's what like adds to the atmosphere of these abandoned locations. It's like literally in the wild, remote lands of Scotland here. It's crazy to find it. Oh, there's a wee rabbit right there. A wee rabbit just scuttled out below the rocks. Yeah, look at this. Here's another outline of the building. You can see it clearly. And look, there's a serious amount of stonework right here with loads of buildings. That's what caught my attention when I was going past on the road. It's like undocumented history here. And every year it degrades more and more. So it's cool to come and video it before it's gone forever. Wow, it's so cool, folks. Look at this. It's just a madness to think about this. Just imagine the wee community out here. The land may have looked different way back then. Crazy natural Scottish forest all around. Sometimes if it was a wee croft or a community, they would clear a bit of land so they could have a few animals and crops. Yeah, they lived like that for hundreds of years, and then I believe like the Highland clearances and stuff like that just did away with the last remnants of that time in Scottish history. It's just amazing to think when these stones were laid here. They've obviously built these buildings with stones that's been available in the surrounding area, but it's mad to think like people were like living inside there or doing their day's work inside places like this. It's just a time that's forgotten. Wow, this is a cool relic here in the Glen of Glen Prosen. And I love seeing stuff, little bits of history that I've never seen before, and then when you visit them you can kind of piece together what might have been there, and you can imagine how it was back in those days when the people walked about on this wild hill. Now it's just sheep territory mostly, and all this land is obviously owned by a nearby like bigger farm, but at one time it was split up to, like into individual little crofts and stuff like that. There would have been 10 or 20 probably individual crofts down this glen at one time, but I would say this here is probably one of the oldest settlements here in Glen Prosen. Look at the way the stones is built here. The surrounds of this building, it's clear It's obvious, like, history here on the hill, but in the last few months it was probably buried mostly by the long grass and the vegetation. Yeah, I love just doing a short video like that, looking at something that I've never seen before, and just think of the history and the story that goes along with these sites. And today's location's Glen Prosen. It's just magic off in the landscape where the history is just hidden in the middle of. It looks like there's been more here, but it's possibly just been knocked down or whatever at a certain time in history. Like, so many years have passed, hundreds of years. And things like this are just on their last legs, folks. Look at the size of some of these stones they've used. Massive. And it's all like a dry stone technique, and that's how you know it's of ancient construction. And maybe even a structure like that could be 1,000 years old. It's history which is just so old, there's nothing really written about things like this. And all that's left is like what's on display today to explore. The wind's gusting through, but I was just waiting to look at how this tree here is like growing out. Oh, look at that massive chunk of quartz there, folks, pure white. Imagine that when the sun was shining off this. See, that's natural within the land around here. You often get big chunks of white quartz. Look at this, the tree's just growing up over this rock. What an incredible scene. It just blows my mind off in like places like this. It's just so cool, folks. To see the outline there of so many buildings. And you can imagine they were at the edge of like a thick forest, maybe stretching up over those hills even at one time. There would have been little areas cleared like this. Probably wasn't many like little crofts when this one was in its prime. You maybe had to travel far to get to the next one. All those other crofts further down the glen are from a newer time, probably hundreds of years after this one was constructed. That's at the time when there would have been like 20 down this glen. Yeah, I'm just sheltering from the wind under this tree. Wind's one of the worst things. Wind and rain, folks. We've managed to avoid it recently on the videos, but sometimes with wild spots like this, it's just unavoidable. Anyway, I'm going to get a couple of photographs of this. Look at the fungus there on the tree. It's got the bit of sheep's wool over the top of it. Crazy scenes of nature right here, folks. So after seeing this spot, and even this area here where the tree's growing, I believe there's been more buildings or another building at this area, judging from the way the stone is. But another interesting point I've noticed, folks, I'll go down here and document this as well. And this is what I mean when the history is just about gone forever. Look at this old remains of what could be the edge of a field or a track here. Look, you can see the stones leading in the line. This here will also date back from the same time as this little croft here. Let's check that out. Crazy old stone boundary markers. And it just shows you in the glens of Angus, all these places, the history is ancient. And there's been like a civilization around here for potentially like thousands of years. Some of this stuff's so old, it's like hundreds of years for sure. Look at this, you can see here, this is maybe one of their fields. It's so windy, it's just crazy out here. Look, this is all built around here, and just check the amount of stones. I think this has been one of their fields related to that croft. I can see the dike line there goes in a 90 degree. So they've maybe had even wheat and stuff back then. They would have used a scythe. Or who even knows what an area like this was for. It's crazy to think, because look, there's even more stones here. Look, within the perimeter, there's more stones. This could have even been like their burial ground, folks. The history is so long ago, that would have been a proper community. And it's interesting to see this. Look, this is certainly related to that site. So I'm back up next to this site again, folks. I'm just following this boundary line. I can see There must have been a dike line up the edge in front of these houses. It's been almost like a small field here and then another separate one over there. They maybe even had animals and stuff in those fields, but I would reckon back at that time, between those fields and all around, it would have been a wild forest environment. There would be so much more trees and like shrubbery. And it's crazy just to think about that. Look at that, folks, look at the way the stones are fitted together. Again, everything's been built properly and strong, but when you see the size of the rooms, you've got to think how many folk were even living in these buildings. And also you've got to think there was potentially wooden buildings as well around this site. Maybe the main, like, people who were in charge stayed in the stone houses, or it's history from such a long period of time ago that it's just hard to even know. And it's cool just to see this and think, but even though the walls have fallen in, it looks smaller than what it would have been, but it still wasn't big. But then maybe that was their way of keeping it warm and stuff in the winter, so it wasn't a big space they had to heat. And I'm not even sure what they had for a roof, probably a crude kind of wooden construction. It's just a madness to think about that. The folk here, it was probably the first folk to use like agricultural and stuff here on the land, like planting wheat and like harvesting it, and maybe using their animals in the field, breeding them and getting the meat and the wool. The wool from sheep and stuff would have been a real important thing to them back then, because all their clothes and stuff would have been weaved from that. It's crazy the amount of ferns and stuff that's just taken over. So to many, what would look like a massive pile of stones on a hill, we've actually found the ancient history of a little Scottish community here hundreds of years ago in this remote Scottish glen. And it's just crazy to think about that history. History which is almost gone and forgotten. This end building here is one of the best ones for just like seeing where the rooms have been. And maybe they've had a little window looking out there. It's just crazy to think who may have stood in this like house at one time. Their lives were so different back at that ancient time in history, folks. In one sense it's from like ages ago, but then in the other sense it's not actually that long ago, you know what I mean? Humans have come so far since the time that these houses were here. It's just an absolute madness, folks, and that's why it's cool to document them before they're gone. That's a little bit of Angus history here that's just almost forgotten, from an ancient time, an ancient settlement. Anyway, it's been a short video, but it's been a cool one. There's been a lot of wind today, which has been unfortunate, blowing around, so I do apologise if the audio has been affected at any point, but we're out here all conditions doing these adventures, folks, so I'm ending it here. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with the next one.